Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Hands-On Apologetics. I am Gary Michuta, your host and sensei for the hour. And yes, you have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. And, I am so pleased to be with you. I love this show because where else can you dig into some of these apologetic topics that you just, you won't find it anywhere else on Catholic radio. And a good example is today's topic, because we're going to have our good friend Erick Ybarra come on at the other side of the break. We're going to talk about Pope St. Leo and the Council of Chalcedon, and or Chalcedon. I know people pronounce it different ways, but he's going to dig into the role of the Pope's authority in that council. And it's going to be very important, especially for Orthodox Catholic dialogue, and also dialoguing with Protestants to show that, there is this authority that emanated from Rome in the early church. And where else can you find that? You find it right here on Hands-On Apologetics. So anyway, welcome everybody to the show. I should probably give my shout-outs early. I want to say hello, everybody watching live stream, Facebook, YouTube, and all those other great social media outlets. Hello, Pauline. Thank you for the emoji explosion. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Very colorful today. Very colorful. I also want to welcome all of you listening live on radio stations around the United States and also around the world via podcast. Welcome aboard, folks. You are in for a treat. We're going to have a great workout session learning how to explain Defend the Faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. And as always, we always begin our workout routine with Finding the Fallacy to help us sharpen our critical thinking skills. And today's Finding the Fallacy is the appeal to emotion. And we also meet an early church father, just because, the early church fathers are so important in terms of historic witness to that original faith that Christ and the apostles handed on to the church. And so as Catholics, we often appeal to these earliest Christian documents, these early Christian authors, because their writings reflect that faith. And on the show, if you listen every episode, you will learn about an awful lot of the early church fathers. Some of them are very famous, like Augustine or Jerome or Athanasius. Some of them not so well known, at least. In fact, today's early church father certainly falls within that category. And actually, for me, that's the most interesting ones, is to learn about these people that otherwise you probably never would have heard of. Today's Meet the Early Church Father is Julian of Eclanum. Julian of Eclanum, who died midway through the 5th century. And that is our program for today. And lest I forget, I want to say that you are part of the program. If you have a question for Erick, you can give us a call, 888-526-2151. It's 888-526-2151. Or you can always send us emails. And I love your emails. The Dojo mailbox address, by the way, is questions@handsonapologetics.com. And that comes directly to me, and I do try to answer your emails. I do my best to make it timely, but not always possible. And, again, I want to recognize that many of us are stationed in place with the COVID virus outbreak, and it's a great time to do apologetics in place. Use your ability to be on social media, folks. Tell people about the show. Tell people about all the shows at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And also, especially if there's a topic that may be of interest, maybe you're talking to someone about the papacy in the early church. You never know. And this would be a great program to talk about Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. You can go to the official flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org, or a handy-dandy phone app, and boom, under our shows, just go to Hands On Apologetics, and you have access not only to this show, but all the other shows Virgin Most Powerful produces, and you have the ability to do all sorts of fun things with it. And also, I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't subscribed to Hands On Apologetics, we do have a channel on YouTube, and we greatly appreciate your subscription. So, as they say, smash the subscription button, or, give us a thumbs up, a like, a horn toot, whatever virtual Pop-Tart you want to give us. We certainly appreciate it, because, after all, that's part of evangelism, letting people know about great resources, especially in apologetics. Many times as apologists, you feel almost like a pharmacist, handing out prescriptions, often as books, it's videos, it's blogs, it's articles. That's kind of like what we do when we defend and explain the faith. So, without further ado, why don't we jump to the finding the fallacy for today? And like I said, today's fallacy is the appeal to emotions. Actually, I kind of don't categorize this really as much as an informal fallacy as much as a propaganda technique. So it's one of those fence sitters, folks. What is the appeal to emotion? Or the argument from passion? That's another name that's used for it. It is a logical fallacy characterized by the manipulation of recipients' emotions in order to win an argument, especially in the absence of factual evidence. So in other words, it's a way of trying to persuade people to endorse a position or buy a product or think a certain way, not through evidence, not through factual evidence, but really an appeal to one's emotions, manipulating them. So, we often hear things, let's do this for the children, right? So it's that's a classic example of the appeal to emotion. Vote for this bill, it's for the children. And of course, everybody wants to help out kids, and that could certainly stir some good positive emotions. But that's not facts. That's not reason why a certain law should be passed. You really need to get down to the nitty-gritty. What exactly is this thing allowing? What is it prohibiting? Motions aside. And, don't be surprised if you get accused of being part Falcon. But, you got to be wary. Whenever somebody tries to stir emotions, that's usually when I get most suspicious. Because there's an alternative motive going on there. And so be aware. This is a very prominent fallacy, and it is the appeal to emotion. All right, why don't we jump to the Meet the Early Church Fathers segment. And today's early church father is Julian of Eclanum. When Pope Zosimus promulgated his decision against Pelagianism in 418, a letter went out to all the bishops of the world requiring their assent in the matter. Now remember, Pelagianism was essentially a denial of original sin. It taught that we can essentially save ourselves without God's grace. God's grace makes it a little easier, but really we kind of have to pull ourselves up from our own bootstraps, which of course denies the fact that we're born in a state of original sin, and that it's only by God's grace that we're enabled to be saved. So that's Pelagianism. And so Pope Zosimus condemns this outright in 418. He sends out this letter for everybody to assent to, and Julian, the Bishop of Eclanum, headed a group of 18 bishops who refused. And from that time, he assumed leadership of the Pelagian party. He was expelled from his see by Pope Zosimus and was exiled by civil authority. With no permanent domicile, we find him in the year 420 enjoying the hospitality of Theodore Mopsuestia, and in as late as 420s, he tarried for a long time with Nestorius in Constantinople. Not exactly the type of people you want to be hanging around with, folks, in antiquity. Okay. Pelagianism was a rather well-developed system, and it owes its synthesis largely to Julian, as with Pelagius and also Celestius. However, his rather extensive writings are, for the most part, extant only in fragmentary conditions. One such book is the 8 books to Florus, which was written around AD 421. In 419, Julian had written a criticism of the first 2 books of Augustine's work on marriage and concupiscence. Several fragments of these 4 books to Turbantius are preserved by Augustine against Julian. Julian followed his 4 books to Turbantius with a criticism of the second of Augustine's 2 books on marriage and concupiscence in 421, 422, and his 8 books to Florus. Let's see. Like Julian himself, Italian bishops in exile because Turbantius and Florus were both exiled because of their Pelagianism. Almost the whole of the first 6 books of the 8 books to Florus can be reconstructed from Augustine's second and unfinished work against, known as Contra Julianum Opus Imperfectum. And Augustine has a great quip. Let's see if I could do it. It has some big words, but this is how he styles Julian's writings. He says, in disputation, most loquacious; in contention, most calumnious; and in profession, most fallacious. Now, how is that for a moniker for a book that you're refuting? Don't expect me to read that 3 times very quickly, but nevertheless, that is our early church father for today, Julian of Euclanum. Coming up next on the other side of the break, we have Master Apologist Erick Ybarra joining us. We're going to talk about Pope St. Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. Stay tuned, folks.
Sirach 11:24 says, "Do not say, I am self-sufficient. What harm can come to me now?" According to St. Catherine of Siena, presumption is like vermin burrowing at the root of the tree of our soul. If we do not uproot it with great care and humility, it will eventually destroy the soul. May God keep us from all presumption of mind and heart, and realize that we depend on Him for everything.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2727. 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands on Apologetics. And we're going to talk about the papacy, namely Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. And to help us do this, we have a fellow who I am so thankful to God that I have met recently. And I've been a fan of his work for actually a while, but I just never put the two together until I met him along with Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology, and that is Erick Ybarra. Erick, who blogs under erickybarra.org. He's also the co-host along with Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology. You can check out all his great stuff at erickybarra.org, and also Reason Theology at www.reasonandtheology.com. And Erick, welcome back to Hands on Apologetics.
Hey, Gary, thank you so much for having me on again. And thank you for your kindness there. I really appreciate that. We at Reason and Theology also mutually benefit from your ministry, and we look forward to having you on again in the near future.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are doing such great work there. And, you know, Erick, the thing I love about your apologetics is the depth of research you do and the clarity in which you're able to recall all that information. You know, those are two things that I really envy about you. I wish I was as competent as you, especially in the field of the papacy.
Yeah, that's I think it's just a matter of the time and the reading. I don't have any special gifts in terms of intellect. I think it's just, if you see my bathroom, I've got a library in there. If you see my kitchen, I've got a library there. If you go to my the section in my living room where I sit down, I have a library there. So I drive my wife a little crazy. So and they're not always stacked correctly. So I think I try my hardest, and I hope to God that he is behind the education that I'm receiving.
Yeah, that's funny. You know, it actually makes me feel better because that's exactly how my house is laid out. Except my wife won't let me put books in the kitchen. So you're blessed in that area.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the background to Pope Leo and his involvement with the Council of Chalcedon. Actually, is it pronounced Chalcedon or Chalcedon?
Well, if you wanted to get real technical, there's a K sound at the beginning and in the middle, so it would be Chalcedon.
Okay.
But nobody ever, it's just not pleasing in the English tongue to say it that way. So it does definitely start with a K sound, so I just say Chalcedon. And I leave the second K or kappa silent, if you would. So I just say Chalcedon. I've heard Chalcedon and Chalcedon. I think Chalcedon is probably a better way, but I'm just so used to saying Chalcedon.
Okay, well that's good. Yeah, that's the first thing to clarify because I've heard it. I've heard all three ways. Not so much with the hard K, but Chalcedon or Chalcedon. So if regardless of how I pronounce it, that's the council I'm going to be referring to.
Right.
So how did councils always meet when there is controversy? So what brought about this council?
Yeah, so this is a very, very important council in the history of the church. It was a major game changer for good and, unfortunately, for some bad as well. It all revolved around a Christological issue concerning the natures of our Lord Jesus Christ. And this controversy, as you know very well, goes all the way back to the second half of the 3rd century. These Christological debates started to crop up here and there, and you had Paul of Samosata and other different theologians speculating on how to understand the unity of Christ, the diversity of Christ. And things got narrowed down at the Council of Nicaea in 325, where Arius was condemned, and the doctrine of Christ's consubstantiality with the Father was made a dogma of the church. But even after that, the Council of Nicaea was kind of taken off the shelf for some decades. And some theologians, particularly in the East, were seeking imperial support to revise Nicaea. And so you had a number of quote-unquote ecumenical councils in the middle of the 4th century. They styled themselves as ecumenical. Of course, they never turned out to be ecumenical in the end. But Nicaea was in a state of question. Then around 380, East and West are coming to consolidate and say Nicaea is where we're going to go with, and it's not going to be questionable anymore. And so the Council of Nicaea gets put back on the shelf. It's sort of like a trophy now in the eyes of everybody. So that's one thing that nobody disagrees with. Nobody disagrees with at this point until we get some barbarian Arians coming from the north, but that's in the west, and that's later. So what's on the shelf is Nicaea. Everybody's on board with it. However, there is a question as to whether Christ has one person, and the terminology gets a little confusing and it's complex, and different authors have different meanings, especially when you go from the Greek and then to the Latin. But there was a guy named Nestorius who was a bishop of Constantinople, and he just couldn't get around to thinking that Christ had a singularity to his subsistent person, such that Mary is the mother of God because of a hypostatic singularity or a hypostatic union, which brought together the nature of God and the nature of man. And so this Nestorian crisis really erupted around 429 in between the Bishop of Alexandria, Cyril, or Kirill, however you want to say it. Kirill and Nestorius kind of had a back and forth. Eventually, Kirill got Pope Celestine involved, and once the Pope gets involved, then things usually get to the high water mark. And the Council of Ephesus gathered in 431, June-ish, I think, and they basically just ransacked Nestorius's theology. It was mainly Cyril of Alexandria. He was the primary mover, theologically speaking, that refuted the doctrine of Nestorius. And so after that council, which itself was controversial because there was a number of issues, the Bishop of Antioch wasn't there, the Bishop of Constantinople, Nestorius wasn't there. There was imperial involvement. Eventually, the emperors had to get involved. And Ephesus 431 really didn't get off the ground until a few years after 431. But once it did, that was like the next Nicaea. It was just a way of saying Nicaea can be misunderstood. The best way to understand Nicaea is the way Cyril of Alexandria explained it. And, of course, Pope Celestine ratified that. So the Council of Ephesus was put on the shelf with Nicaea in terms of Christological doctrine. You fast forward 20 years, though, and there's a dispute in Constantinople with a particular man by the name of Eutyches, or in some Greek circles, they call him Eutychios. But he was an archimandrite, which is basically just a Greek way of saying an abbot of a monastery in Constantinople. And he ran into some conflict with the Bishop of Constantinople, whose name was Flavian. Flavian had heard some accusations from people within the vicinity that Eutyches was teaching a doctrine that was contrary to Nicaea and Ephesus. And so they held a council in Constantinople. 448 was the year. And they basically condemned this new character, Eutyches. And that is what puts in motion the events that would come with the Council of Chalcedon and how it affected Christendom at the time. How are we on time for this first segment?
Just under 3 minutes, maybe 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you want to say anything before. That's a mile mark there with Eutyches.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you want to say anything.
Yeah. What did Eutyches? Now, what exactly did he hold?
Well, it's really hard to say because I've not read any of his firsthand works. I know that he claimed to teach the doctrine of Nicaea. He cited Athanasius, Hilary of Poitiers. He cited all the good guys, but his thing was that Nestorianism. He was afraid that Nestorianism was continuing to creep up, and so as a result of this, he so emphasized the unity in Christ that he admitted that there was two natures before the union, but after the union in the womb of the virgin. So as soon as you have the fertilized egg in the womb of the Virgin Mary, the zygote, that was no longer a duality of God nature and man nature. And so now you had just he veered to the side of singularity. There was only one. And so this called into question, well, this is God did not, and God nature didn't get hungry. God nature didn't fall asleep, and God nature did not suffer on the cross. So so it called into question this issue. It was Eutyches going to confirm that the two natures still persist in their duality after the union, after he becomes a human. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the controversy that centers down with Eutyches. And of course, he appealed to Rome at first. So Eutyches sought the authority of the Bishop of Rome, who at this time was Leo the Great, and he was a deacon at the time of the Council of Ephesus.
Oh, very good. Well, that's perfect. That leads us right up to the council. We're chatting with Master Apologist Erick Ybarra about Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of break. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's, In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
About Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. And we're with Erick Ybarra of www.erickybarra.org, and also his great work with Michael Lofton at reasonandtheology.com. So, Erick, so the church faced kind of two threats in terms of who and what Jesus is. Nestorius kind of wanted to split Jesus's, I guess, so separate the two natures. He almost becomes two persons. Then you have Eutyches, who wants to so unify the two natures that it's almost like it becomes one nature. Is that a good way to summarize?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely how it was conveyed. It's such a difficult topic, though. It gets more complex, especially after the Council of Chalcedon. But for the moment, Eutyches sought out help from the Pope, and Leo the Great was the Pope at the time. And so Leo the Great ended up investigating into the matter. And so he sent messengers over to Constantinople to kind of snoop out what was going on. He received a letter from the Bishop of Constantinople, Flavian, with the proceedings of the council that had condemned Eutyches. And once Leo saw what was going on and what Eutyches was teaching, he wrote what is famously known as his tome, in Greek, Thomos, of Christology, and it was sent to Constantinople. It was addressed to Flavian, and this treatise on Christology, on the two natures of Christ, was basically put as the standard teaching for the East to use in order to arbitrate the ongoing disputes. Because there were supporters of Eutyches. Eutyches was close to the imperial court. He was very close to the power of the state. And so what ended up happening is the Eutyches ended up, once he realized that Rome was writing this document that was going to basically haunt his career in the East, he consulted the emperor, Theodosius II. And Theodosius II convened a council, and at the same time, the Patriarch of Alexandria is very interested in all this, Dioscorus. He's very interested in all of this as well. So the council, there's an ecumenical council that's called in 449 in Ephesus, and it was purposeful because that's where Cyril's doctrine was dogmatized just 20 years before. And at this council, the Pope sent legates. You had Flavian of Constantinople there. You had Dioscorus. You had Juvenal of Jerusalem. And you had, I forgot the name of the Antiochian patriarch. I think Domnus, I think, was his name, or Maximus, either one. But this council ended up being a disaster. It basically reversed this condemnation on Eutyches, it didn't even read the tome of Leo. The sources say that it was actually forbidden to be read. Dioscorus ended up saying later that that was not the case. But in all fairness, the claim was it wasn't read. And it was a violent mobster council that was under the thumb of Dioscorus of Alexandria. And the idea was that Eutyches was released from his condemnation, and he was free to return to ministry. He got his job back, and the papal legates protested at the council, but they didn't care. The Dioscorus didn't care, and several other bishops that were in concert with him proceeded with the council anyway. They ended up getting a large amount of signatures. I want to say it was like 126 signatures, and they were able to get the emperor to ratify it because at this time the imperial ratification was paramount. And they passed it off as an ecumenical council. Now, Flavian of Constantinople ended up writing an appeal to the Pope using terms that clearly portray universal primacy in the church held by the Pope. And when the papal legates got back to Rome and they told the Pope the story of what happened, that his tome wasn't read, and that despite their protests, they still went ahead with the council and completed it and sent it out and published it and everything, Leo was outraged. And the problem is the East kind of bought into this. The patriarchs were settled with it. Flavian passed. He died. He died at the council due to injuries, in fact, from the violence that took place at the council. And so this is quite a scene. East and West are now at odds. The patriarchs are not in communion with the Pope because the Pope basically annulled that council and petitioned the emperor to hold another council in Italy. And the idea was to bring all things to the West because the East seems to be warring with each other in terms of, you know, who's in charge and whose authority is going to win out in the end and what doctrine is correct. But Theodosius II did not grant that petition, and so Theodosius found himself in opposition to the Pope as well. And so this was quite a tragedy. You had a number of Orthodox bishops in the East who wrote appeals to Rome asking for intervention to overturn basically what happened at Ephesus 449. Leo would call it the Latrocinium, which is a robber council or a council of thieves. And so this is how things came to a bottleneck at this point in time. What changed things was when Theodosius II passed away. He fell off his horse and died. Then, by God's he fell off his horse, and that was it. But a supporter of Leo's tome came into office, Marcion. He's a saint especially in the Orthodox Church, and he rekindled Leo's program of calling another council to get these things settled. And Leo originally wanted to council in Italy, but at this point in time, Leo didn't even want to council in Italy anymore. He was basically just wanted his tome to be signed by the patriarchs and by bishops in the East, and for peace to be restored. But Marcion wanted to call a council, and so he called it at first in Nicaea. That's where they gathered first, but it was moved to Chalcedon. And this is where the center stage takes place in 451. Everything's put back on the table. Dioscorus is there. Juvenal of Jerusalem is there. You've got You've got not Flavian, but his successor Anatolius is there of Constantinople, and Leo sends his legates with his tome once again. So the idea was, we're going to try this again, but this time Leo sort of put more muscle behind his grip to the legates. The legates were given specific instructions, and the Easterners were not to chill around with that. And so the papal legates basically led the council with the imperial commissioners of Marcion, the emperor. And at this council, Leo's tome was passed. It was read. It was lauded. It was cherished as a orthodox statement from the voice and lips of Peter. And Eutyches was condemned. Dioscorus was condemned. You had a number of people who went along with Dioscorus who were contrite and repented at the council. And they found themselves back in the good graces of the Pope and the Church. And it was quite a victory, at least from all appearances, for the Pope's treatise, his tome on Christology, which again taught that the duality of Christ's natures, his God nature and his human nature, it's not only that those two natures still continue to exist, even if they are hypostatically united in one person. They're still side by side in their appropriate distinction, and so there's no mixture of the two natures, and there's no permanent dual severance of the natures. They are united in the person of the Son of God. And but this, you could run into a lot of confusion and misunderstanding, especially with the language difference. And so even when Chalcedon was finished and everybody went home, the controversies didn't go away. And one particular controversy was the status of the See of Constantinople. The Eastern bishops wanted to put Constantinople in some sort of a primacy over the East, and so they passed a canon which had been already in process 60 years before at Constantinople I in 381. The third canon said that because Constantinople is the new Rome, it should enjoy privileges like old Rome.
Okay, very good. Well, that's a great place to hold to come on the other side of the break. We're chatting with Master Apologist Erick Ybarra about Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Jesus said in Matthew 26, "Stay awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation." According to St. Ephrem, Jesus, who feared nothing, experienced fear and asked to be freed from death, although he knew it was impossible. How much more must we persevere in prayer before temptation assails us, so that we may be freed when the test has come? May God grant that we may withstand temptation and carry out His will in all things.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, folks. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra of www.erickybarra.org and also his great work that he does with ReasonTheology.com, talking about Pope Leo and the Council of Chalcedon. And so, Eric, it's kind of funny. We always think of ourselves as living in the worst time in church history. But, when you think about the Robert Council in Ephesus and all the stuff that was going on, even coming into Chalcedon, you realize there was some pretty scary times, in the early church.
Oh yeah, the after Chalcedon, those who rejected it ended up murdering the Patriarch of Antioch with reed pens. They got a bunch of reeds and stabbed the patriarch to death. Yeah,
Wow.
it was pretty bad. There was killing, and there's no other word to describe it.
Yikes! So you were saying right before the break, they read Leo's tome, it gets adopted, but then there's this other issue that's kind of lurking underneath all of this.
Yeah. So Constantinople, when Constantine, when he used to reside in Rome, that's where the Principiate, that's where the capital city of the Roman Empire was. As a result of Rome being there, and Peter going to Rome, you had this two different kinds of primacy, you could say. There was this. Because Rome was such a preeminent city, the Bishop of Rome had a very special, intimate pastoral supervision of basically all of Italy, 10 provinces and probably more than 10 provinces. But then you also had the Petrine universal privilege, which was his care for all the churches, which is a different kind of primacy. But he had this, the early terms was metropolitan. He had this larger oversight of provincial metropolitans. So he was kind of like a patriarch in the West. And when Constantine moved his capital to Byzantium, an old Greek city, Byzantium was a small little city, under the authority of the Metropolitan of Heraclea. And so it just wasn't fitting to have the imperial city be inferior in ecclesiastical matters to this Heraclean city. So it was pretty quickly, within a few decades, that discussions started to get around, okay, we need to sort of beef up the ecclesiastical prestige of Byzantium, or Constantinople as it would be changed to. And so at the Council of Constantinople I, they basically said, well, look, the capital used to be in Rome. Rome had a wide supervision over Italy and the whole peninsula of Italy. Now we're in Constantinople. We're not going to have just a little, our stature's got to be somewhat comparable. So they said, well, this is new Rome. As a result, our prestige here in the East should be comparable to what Rome had in the West. again, this is a different strata of ecclesiastical primacy than the papacy. This is talking about patriarchal supervision. It's a very different kind, and Rome did not have patriarchal supervision over the entire world. That was impossible. So Constantinople grows into a patriarchate, and but nobody ratified that council in Constantinople 381. In fact, Rome never ratified those canons ever. So they only accepted the creed of that council. But in any case, the 28th canon of Chalcedon basically wanted to reaffirm that canon from 381. And Pope Leo annulled it because he thought that this is too much folding together of the secular stature of the Roman Empire and ecclesiastical arrangements. Those two things are not parallel. And so for Leo, he saw it as a novelty. It was the church getting together with the state and coming up with a nifty design. So in his eyes, that was just a no-go. So he actually annulled that canon, and for that reason, Chalcedon only had 27 canons in all of the early canonical collections until the 6th century, where you have some modifications by canonists in the East. But that would serve as a point of contention as history goes forward. But the primary thing here about Chalcedon is that Egypt, Syria, Armenia, some places in Illyricum, and in Palestine rejected the Council of Chalcedon. And this schism is still existing today. They're known as the Coptic and the Syriac Oriental Orthodox churches. And to this day, they look back upon Leo and that whole ordeal as horrific. They reject the tome of Leo. They don't accept Eutyches, but they think Dioscorus was a good man. And so Chalcedon is basically their robber council, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate, and we could go into the theology of that because there's a lot of linguistic and theological nuance, but I'm probably not prepared to go into that. But it is unfortunate that this schism persisted, and it would affect future schisms between East and then East and West. So you had a schism in the East between Easterners versus Easterners, and then you had the Egyptian Coptic and Syriac Orthodox now out of communion with Rome. And it's a unfortunate event. It's one of the biggest schisms in the past, and it's largely forgotten.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we often hear about the Copts in Egypt, especially with all the persecution with Islam. But I think many Catholics don't have a clue who they are or what the relationship is to the church.
Right. Yeah, they kind of largely forgotten, and it comes down to church authority. Here you have the Egyptians; they rejected papal authority, but they also rejected the authority of an ecumenical council. So right. They kind of ran out of options. Not only were they willing to go against the Pope, they were willing to go against the ecumenical councils. So then the ultimate criterion for truth for them was basically their best interpretation. And so that was what they were going to make the trophy for the end of the day. And it's unfortunate that this division continues to exist. Of course, Leo at the time thought that his tome was infallible. There was no questioning it, and he made no bones about it. He was loud and clear that he was protected from error because of his inheritance of the promises that Christ gave to St. Peter. And so you had two different ecclesiologies at work, two different epistemologies at work. And I would say, without trying to be triumphalistic, that the Roman claims won out in the end.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because usually Leo's tome is brought up as an example of an infallible proclamation and papal infallibility. It's usually we hear about the decree on the definition of the Assumption or the Immaculate Conception, but this seems to be in that same league.
Yeah, I mean, originally it was probably written just for the local situation in Constantinople, but when things got ratcheted up, he republished it with universal intention. And I think at that point it was vested with infallible authority.
Yeah, very good. Well, Erick, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about your work on your blog and also Reason and Theology. What do you got cooking on your blog? Any new articles coming up?
I haven't been able to get to any articles lately because I've been trying to finish up the book on the papacy that I'm writing. So those would have been going into the article form, but I prefer now to just put it in book form. So I've been sharing, our videos, and occasionally I'll put out a blog post. But that's not going to be the center stage until the book that I'm working on is finished. But with Reason and Theology, we've got a lot cooking up. One of the exciting shows that we just had was James Lakutis, who's actually a Greek Orthodox convert to Catholicism. And he gave us a nice 1.5 hour apologetic for the papacy. And we also have upcoming Thomas Pink. He's a Catholic theologian. He's going to be talking about the document Dignitatis Humanae, the decree on religious liberty at the Second Vatican Council, and whether that is a rupture with the Catholic tradition or not. And he takes the position that it's not. So that's exciting. So that's what we've got. And I think we've got some debates coming up with the canon. I just don't know the specifics. But I am excited about that.
Yeah, it's such great work there, and from so many different perspectives, too. Didn't you also have recently a mythicist non-believer? Was it Price, if I remember correctly?
Yes, yeah, Richard Price. He's such a good guy, We had him on last year, I think, and it was just a joy to have him on because here's a guy who seems sincere, open. He's very doubtful, skeptical, but at the same time, he seems to be open to know when he's wrong. So we had 2 shows with him now, which was great. But yeah, he basically thinks Jesus is a mythos, mythology. Jesus didn't exist historically. But he's also done some other work on Mormonism and some other things. So yeah, that was performed yesterday. So check that out. Check out what we got coming up as well.
Very good. Well, Erick, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
And that's Erick Ybarra, folks. You can check out his stuff at erickybarra.org or all these great debates and discussions at reasonandtheology.com. Wow, and it's already time to shut down the Midwest Command Center, turn off the dojo lights. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. But never fear, coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Justin Show. I hope all of you have a great day, and God willing, we will be back again tomorrow with Carlo Broussard. Talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.